I'm going to answer last. You want to answer from all of us, right? Yeah, so I'm going to answer last.
So the question is, what's the thing
What do
we
you
struggle with as a
Or
coach?
something that you learned throughout your coaching that really affected you and made you a better coach.
Let's all take a second to think about this one. Does anyone have anything ready?
deep
Nick probably
fucking
does.
question.
Nick is always really opinionated.
Thanks, Niki. The thing, I mean, I can always point to the thing that made me a better coach was forcing myself to fix things on the spot right now, right? So, I don't think I was ever a terrible coach, but especially hanging around Rip, and if you've ever been coached by Rip or been in the room when he's coaching people, whatever the fuck he decides is going to get fixed right now is going to get fixed right now. Where before, if I had clients and they're long-term clients, they're with me for a long time, you see something and you're like, I'll fix it next time, or you just get kind of complacent about things. But it's advice I give to all like interns I deal with and people who want to be starting strength coaches. I say, if you see a problem, first of all, you have to find a problem, and if you find a problem, you need to fix it right now, no matter what's going on. You just fix it right now, because it will force you to develop the ability to communicate to whoever that person is in a way that's going to get them to fix the thing, right? So, because the old lady is going to have to hear something else than the 17-year-old kid. So if you just say, no matter what's going on, I'm going to fix this person, then you're learning skills as a coach to be able to communicate with people, no matter who they are. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
So, I think over the last 5 years or so, that's been the biggest thing for me.
I struggle with empathizing with lifters who give up early.
Look at him.
Yeah, I do.
You feel your blood pressure going
Yeah,
up.
getting mad.
No, I'm not mad, man. It's like disappointed. I was like, I don't know. Yeah.
Like when your eyebrows don't move, I get more nervous.
It's scary.
It's challenging for me because I'll watch them and I'm like, man, could have had that. Like,
Yeah.
totally could have had that. And I don't know how to do it. I can't do it for you, right? I can show you the technique. I can do my best to encourage you. Use motivational interviewing. Like, well, why is strength important to you? And those kinds of things. But I can only go so far. And that's challenging for me as a coach.
I think starting strength has taken Rip and starting strength has taken a lot of sort of browbeating in the last few years about the reputation for being dogmatic about strength training and programming and whatnot. And so, when I first got into this, when I first got into starting strength, I had coached quite a while, 10 or 12 years already. I was a decent coach. And there were some things that I didn't agree with Rip about entirely. And the longer I've gone on, it's very frustrating to me because he's right about almost all this stuff. And so there were times in my coaching that I would make concessions for my lifters and let them do it the way they wanted to do it, because I thought, well, maybe they are a snowflake. Maybe there is a thing that makes it so that they don't need to do fives. They could do 3 sets of 8, or they could do high bars instead of low bars, or they could do whatever programming that isn't LP and do more volume or more exercise selection or whatever. And I've thought a lot about this sort of dogmatic piece for a while, and the reality is like, yeah, we are, and I am, and I've done it. I think I've done it longer than anybody in starting strength other than Rip. And that's not that. Just by the luck of the draw, I just started coaching really early, and I got to coach lots of hours for a long time. And the more I've done it, I've started to realize like there is a right way to do this, and there's a wrong way to do it. And that doesn't mean that you can't get strong, you can't make progress in other ways. There is a best way, and it's hard to argue against the best way. And so figuring out as a coach how to communicate that in an empathetic way to people to help them understand that, listen, I know you think that you can't do it this way, but you can. And here's why. I know that strength training will make you better, and I know how to get you strong. And so figuring out how to communicate that in a way that people can still see that it's empathetic. I mean, it's really sort of a sales job. I mean, it really is. It's not selling just to make the money. It's you have to sell them on this style of training. And so I've learned that you don't need to make concessions most of the time. You need to help people understand why we do what we do, why it's important to do it that way, and then it's okay to be dogmatic. I mean, we have to have principles and value systems. That's what we have. And so we've developed this system of training and a style that we've found works for 99.9% plus of the population. And so I'm getting to the point where I'm okay with being dogmatic. That doesn't mean I'm okay with telling people do it this way or go fuck yourself. Like that doesn't work very well. And so that's a big piece, man. You just have to stick to your values. And so for me, I start to see the compromises with my clients as a compromise on my value system. And so then I look back on it and I have some sort of guilt about it. Like, well, why did I compromise that? And it almost always comes out to kick me in the ass later. I shouldn't have done it. I should have sat down and explained to them why we do what we do. Here's why I need you to squat this way. Here's why I need you to take the stuff you're doing right now and put it on the back burner and focus on strength because you're not strong. We got to get you strong first. We're going to do it this way. And so, yeah, and I've sort of come to terms with that in my own life.
Well, it's a tough act to follow.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It helps as you mature as a coach, and actually as you start to actually make money as a coach, right? Because when you're first starting out, it's easy to let clients dictate what you do.
That's true.
But you need the pay.
Yeah,
because
like
you're broke.
Like Wendler talked about "fuck you" money, I think.
Yeah.
a while back, where where you can, when you get to the point where you don't really need that client, you can focus on helping the people that want help.
Sure.
Or if you think it's worth it to convince somebody, you'll convince them. But we intend to fix this thing up between SSOC and starting strength, where you're a starting strength coach, you're going to be making money and you're going to be coaching people who want to get strong, and you'll have the tools to be able to explain why that's important. But if the person doesn't want to do what you want to do, they're not a good fit. They're not a good fit. And when you the sooner you understand that, you'll tailor your message better that way. Because it's not that I'm saying to tell clients to fuck off. You'll be better able to tailor your message when you're confident that if you're not able to convince them, that it's them and not you.
I think one thing that I always continue to try and learn about and learn from is how to motivate each client of mine. Like the longer I've had several clients now that I've had for more than 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and training has priority sometimes and really low priority sometimes, and it's really tough when it's the highest priority because their whole life seems to be weighing on every workout session. And so managing the emotional aspect of training, I think, gets really difficult the longer you're with a certain client. And so knowing when you do actually need to say, like, I understand life is really hard right now, let's back off the stress a bit, or when you actually need to be the boss and say, yeah, life is really hard, but you can still do this, and I need you to do this. And when, it's balancing that empathy, and when you need to be a hard ass. Like, I got a review. We do regular reviews and surveys with our clients, as you probably know. And one of my clients, he was like, what can my coach do better? And he said, she should have called me a pussy for missing that deadlift. And so knowing who you can do that with and who you shouldn't do with, and when it's right to do that with and when you shouldn't. And because if you're a coach that doesn't seem to care, then they'll go away and they won't train very much. So always trying to be the right coach at that right time. And it's tough because everybody's so different too. It's always something to learn there.
There you go.
Did you answer?
Yeah. I think all of our responses kind of fell along the
there's
same
some-
lines.
yeah.
It's very interesting. We've never had this conversation together, but we're all saying similar things.
Yeah.
That was beautiful, Matt. Good job.
Yeah.
Listen to mansplaining.
So the question was, any advice for especially women when they're training in commercial gyms? So you're always going to get someone who is just your champion, who knows more than you do about your squat, who's going to come up and tell you about it. So I think it's best to interact with them as little as possible and say, thank you for that. I have a coach. I'm going to do my set now. Headphones really help a lot. But I think it's okay to thank them, be like, I have a coach, and then just like try not to have any more dialogue with them and just kind of move along.
I had a guy in the gym who, while I'm coaching a client, tell my client and me that he shouldn't be going past 90 degrees while I'm coaching my client.
I brought my friend with me to squat one day, and I had her squat. She did fine. And then while we were benching, I was benching, and my friend was watching me, and this girl came up to her and was like, I just wanted to tell you that you shouldn't squat like that because you're going to break your back. And I was like, what is happening right now? And I had seen her squatting, and just like it just kind of hurt me to watch her squat before. So there's always going to be someone, but I think it's best just be like, okay, thanks. And then just like go back to your barbell. It's really entertaining though. And also just record all the dumb shit you see and upload it because it's so entertaining.
I would recommend that you gain 100 pounds and grow a beard.
That's fine.
No one ever helps
And
me.
also lift more weight than them because they stop talking to you once they
That's
see how
true.
strong you
Yeah.
are. Yeah, that's really fun. Or just walk around with a dip belt on with a lot of weight on it. Like you're gonna do chin-ups, because then they're like, oh my god, that girl's gonna do chin-ups with all that weight. So the question was, would we rather be 20% better looking or 20%
We're all
stronger?
fucking hot. Why would we need to be in this?
I'd definitely choose better looking.
I would definitely choose strength.
I've been strong for years. I've never been better looking.
What about you, Nick?
Strength for sure.
Where's
No
Brent
way.
Carter? Jane, answer for him. Stronger?
3 inches taller or 200 more pounds on the total?
300 more pounds on my total.
Where can I apply the 3 inches?
Brent, the questions from Mike were, first one, would you rather be 20% better looking or 20% stronger?
Stronger is objective.
Stronger is objective. We'll take it. We'll take it. No, 20% better looking. I always get 20% stronger.
Okay.
I can't necessarily get 20%.
You have some
better
control
looking.
over the strength.
That's right.
That's right.
And then
Easy question.
this one I want to hear.
Okay.
Would you rather have 300 more pounds on your total or be 3 inches taller?
3 inches taller because once again, I can eventually put the 300 pounds on my total.
Especially if you're 3 inches taller.
Fuck yes.
Yeah.
Easy.
How do you guys like to choose variations of the lifts when you program, like, you know, a tempo squat is ideal
Yeah.
for someone having general balance
Sure.
issues, things like that?
It's a gold star for you, Thingman.
Thanks.
Good question.
So first off, the caveat here, right, is that novices shouldn't use
Right.
variations. We don't use variations on the lift. I call them variations on the lift. That's usually what I'll call supplemental lifts. So if it's a variant on the actual main lift, and so I'll usually pick them based on a couple of different criteria. One is the lift adds stress because it adds range of motion. So it's a greater range of motion than the normal lift. Deficit deadlift is compared to a regular deadlift. So we get additional amount of stress. Tempo squat, more time under tension. So it's similar sort of thing, even though it might not be more range of motion because it's more time under tension. It takes longer to do, it's more stress. Or we get one that's a little shorter range of motion, but we can drive up higher intensity. So something like a rack pull, especially after you practice it for a while, you ought to be able to rack pull more than you deadlift from the floor, right? Press lockout, same sort of thing. You should press lockout eventually. First time you do press lockouts, you probably don't do as much as you press, and same thing for rack pulls. But and then the third piece is, so I always want to try to drive up intensity. I want to drive up intensity, or I always want to drive up stress, but I want to drive up stress either by increasing total amount of work via a greater range of motion or slowing down the bar, whatever, with the tempo, or I want to be able to give me an overload of intensity. So I've got two ends of the spectrum there for supplemental lifts. And then the third piece of that is, to help me also, is I want to try to pick weaknesses of my lifter, right? So if my lifter is weak in a specific spot, so like on a press lockout, if you're really good at throwing the weight, and you throw the weight and it slows down or stops here and comes right back down, I'm gonna go right there, I'm gonna back it back down an inch or so, and I'm gonna make it right where you're like in no man's land. And you're gonna press from that spot, We're going to try to make that sort of weak spot as strong as possible. And so that, and then it also gives you some, if all you've done for years is the main lifts all the time, which by the way, you can get strong forever on the main lifts all the time. You don't really have to have supplemental movements, but also just kind of nice and a fresh change of pace for people, especially if you get to the point where now you've trained long enough that you're advanced, so you're hitting essentially all the lifts 2 or 3 times a week all the time. It's really nice to have a little bit of a variant on the lift, right? And so we can create some additional stress, drive up some additional stress by longer range of motion, making the lift a little harder than it should be, or on the other end of the spectrum, making it heavier than it normally would be by making it a little easier.
And just kind of based on those two broad categories of, a higher intensity versus generally more work, you can plug it in.
Yeah, there's actually, for me, I think there's actually very few that we use. And this is the other thing, we're constantly talking about this among the coaching staff on the different Slack channels and stuff that we're on. We all kind of come up with the same sort of lifts that we really like, right? Like, so for deadlifts, we like deficit deadlifts and rack pulls, right? Haltings, like or pause deadlifts, like a pause deadlifts, which is not the same thing as a halt. I guess I like pause better. But there's not very many, right? For squats, we like a tempo squat. We like a chain squat, pause squat, pin squat. That's about it, right? For bench press, a board press, a slingshot, a pause, a longer pause, a 2-second pause, and make it a little harder off the chest, that kind of stuff.
And that's because we find those things actually work, right?
They seem to carry over.
But still within that, there's a lot of just coach preference.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it's just things
Sure.
that you like to program, things that you like to coach, things that you do yourself.
You
It
see-
all
yeah, that
matters.
carries over.
I mean, I've never programmed a deficit deadlift,
Yeah.
but I program rack pulls all the time.
Yeah.
I program the haltings. So there's some variability in as far as like things that you yourself use or that you prefer to have your lifters do.
But think about like a halting and a deficit deadlift are sort of fulfilling the same criteria, right? 2 different lifts, both harder than a deadlift, more work, right? So they would both work, they could kind of be interchangeable,
And they're like overloading the bottom of the lift.
right? Overloading the bottom.
Again, with the caveat that obviously novices aren't doing it, and when you do introduce these supplemental lifts, you're doing it like one at a time. Going back
Yeah.
to the one variable at a time, introduce it, see what happens after a few weeks, 4, 6 weeks or so, before then making other changes.
Yep. And I would typically introduce that on a 4-day split when you get to about the 4-day split spot, so that on your squat day, you're still doing your normal squat, and you do a deadlift variation. And on your deadlift day, you do a normal deadlift and a squat variation. And then same thing for press and bench press. Right, main press, variant bench, main bench, variant press.